Do you know who I am? I'm kind of a big deal.
Hey there, welcome to another edition. It is the Bmore Baseball Podcast. He is the former MLB 14-year veteran Mike Bordick and the Orioles Hall of Famer. I'm just Jerry Coleman. Welcome inside. We're producing brand new content every day, Bordy, on X, on Facebook, on Instagram. You can find us at Bmore Ball Pod on YouTube. That's Bmore Ball Pod. And when you subscribe and show us evidence of a subscription, you qualify for a $50 gift card from Lido Pizza. That's right, free food just for subscribing. Today, it is episode number 16. Bordy, we're going to be joined by the Major League Baseball trainer of the Stars, former MLB trainer, spent more than 3 decades in the game, Barry Weinberg. We'll also talk about the resurgence of the Orioles. Does it coincide with the return of a certain player? And do these in-game interviews during televised baseball games need to come to a stop? We'll get into that. And we'll also hear from Dr. Michael Jacobs. The doc will examine Ryan Mountcastle's injury and his timetable for a return. But let's of course, bring in our featured guests. As always, they're sponsored by Pappas Seafood. From crab cakes to seafood classics, they'll deliver straight to your door. 4 locations in the Baltimore area, plus nationwide shipping. Order today at pappascrabcakes.com. And a reminder, next Tuesday, we are live at Pappas. Next Tuesday, June the 17th, 11 a.m., as we are joined by another Orioles Hall of Famer, Joe Orsulak. But Barry, thanks for being here. And let's start with some of these injuries that are going on around baseball. Do some of them baffle you to a degree because maybe they didn't occur when you were presiding over the A's and, of course, the Cardinals all those years? Or do you think maybe you know why some of these injuries are starting to occur at a rapid rate like we really haven't seen before, particularly the pitchers?
Well, I think some of it stems from their preparation in the minor leagues. And I don't think they pitch enough. I don't think they pitch enough innings. I think they limit the innings pitched. It was very interesting. Our director of player development, who's now retired, Gary LaRocque, and the Cardinals told the minor league managers and pitching coaches, do not limit the pitcher's innings or number of pitches until the game dictates it. Okay. In other words, if you're having a bad game, but just because you're at 80 or 90 pitches and you're smooth sailing, keep them in. Let them throw 100 pitches, let them throw 110. So I think sometimes the preparation, and then all of a sudden you get to the major leagues and the intensity is much greater. As Mike knows, the speed of the game moves up, the intensity, and these kids aren't ready to. 5 innings in the big leagues isn't equivalent to 5 innings in the minor leagues. And so you say, well, they're throwing 5 or 6 innings now. Well, it's not the same, I don't think, at the major league level as it is in the minor league level. So I think that's one factor. I think velocity has been too overemphasized. Especially young kids. I say they just want to throw so hard. How hard did I throw? Well, they've stopped learning how to pitch and not concentrate on just how hard I can throw.
Yeah. It's really interesting, Barry, and you've been in the game for so long. And thanks for coming on the show. You're a great friend of mine. Of course, we came up together. You were my first big league trainer, so I got a soft spot for you. You know that. Care about you deeply. But you have seen baseball truly evolve. You got into the game back in the 70s. And I know when I came in the game in the early 80s, weight training was still kind of looked at as taboo. Weight training got more specific. It got involved to the game. And next thing you know, it seemed like there was a bumping heads of strength and conditioning and training rooms. And today, it seems like it's more than ever, this controversy. How do you keep major league players healthy and on the field? And you alluded to it. I think the development in the minor leagues, they're limiting guys, and all of a sudden you're thrust into the big stage at the major league level. Is it because a lack of talent or just not a true understanding of what it takes to play 162 games in the big leagues?
Well, I think that's a great point that strength conditioning and performance is an on-field activity, and sometimes you can overdo the strength and conditioning and not use it as adjunct therapy, but that you don't want it to dominate your your strength program. Many times, I've asked some of the strength coaches, what are you doing this exercise for? And and, I understand the principles behind them, but also like even in spring training, it was always bothered me that kids spend 7-8 hours on the field. That's a conditioning exercise in itself. There's a terrific therapist, athletic trainer, Gary Gray is in Michigan. And he always had a theory that the test is the exercise and the exercise is the test. In other words, what you do on the field is an exercise in itself. Or if you went out and took grounders, fielding and stuff, that's an exercise. That's your conditioning. We had a terrific instructor with the Cardinals, very famous, named George Kissel. Okay, George Kissel, very famous. He's one of those unknown guys that should be in the Hall of Fame. He developed more players, more infielders, and more, regular position players than anybody. But he would go out and he would have these guys exhausted by the time they do a drill, whether it's a fielding drill, a running drill, stuff like that. So I think we've gotten away sometimes from the actual activity, of baseball. And I think what you do on the field has to relate to what you do in the weight room.
Barry, do you recall when the turn was made? Mike mentioned it, where weightlifting wasn't as prominent back in the day, where it has become, mandatory, it seems, nowadays. Was it during the Bash Brothers era where you guys were around in the early 90s?
Well, in the late 80s and early 90s, we started lifting a little more. I think strength coaches became prominent. And listen, I had a terrific strength coach. Like Bob Alejo was our strength coach. He was terrific because he understood the principles of baseball, and he could relate. I've had a couple strength coaches I've dealt with in the Cardinals, terrific kids. They'd ask questions on is this too much, and they coordinate with their coaches. What are you going to do on the field today, and how can I help you when they get off the field? In the same way the coach said, I'd like a little more time on the field with the kid to do this and this. And the strength coach would say, great, I'll cut down his workout, so there's got to be, I think the biggest problem in sports and maybe in America is communication. You just have to communicate with the people who are involved in the process.
Yeah. No, I hear you, Barry. Listen, the Orioles and like every other major league team have just had a rash of injuries, but injury specific now to position players. If back in the 90s, let's just say Walt Weiss, Carney Lansford, Terry Steinbach, and Ricky Henderson all had hamstring pulls the same time.
Right.
Would the concern be with the training room or the strength and conditioning, and how would that be addressed?
Well, you would sit with the strength coach and say, okay, here's our issues. I have these 4 or 5 issues. Okay, they're all the same issues. What are we doing in the process to get them ready to play or to condition them, whether it's in the off season or during the season or preseason? Okay, so you sit down and you talk to them. They say, well, let's cut this one out. Okay, so there's like you say, there's a coordinated effort to talk about. Is there a consistency in injuries? Listen, you sprained an ankle. I never forget this, and came back quick as anybody I've ever had because of your determination, and because of your will, and you're just resilient, and your desire to get back. Okay, so
well, there was also fear of that kid that came up looking to take my spot. I did not want him out there.
Yeah,
that's the truth.
No, I know. Yeah, it's a good point. But all these things. There's avoidable injuries and unavoidable injuries. When you sprain an ankle, it's unavoidable. I'm sorry, you turn an ankle. It may be a poor base running technique or something, but getting hit by a pitch, running into something, those things are you can't avoid those. When a guy gets hit in the hand and breaks, how do you avoid that? But when you have a consistency of hamstring injuries, oblique injuries, things like that, then you got to assess what you're doing, and are we doing too much? Are we doing not enough? Are we, I don't know, people's programs, but you can also just look at the people and say, okay, let's sit down and have a coordinated effort as to assess, what the process is and where they're getting hurt, why they're getting hurt. So I think communication is key. I don't think there's one athletic training or conditioning technique that avoids it, or that says, oh, we have to do this exercise and we won't have these injuries.
Yeah, Barry, to my knowledge, not many trainers have gone forward and written books. You have Eating Your Way Through Baseball, or Eating My Way Through Baseball, if you were saying it. It's a type of book I really enjoy because I enjoy meals and hearing about road trips. You get it right there. Adam Gladstone's supposed to get me a copy, so I'm still
I have one.
I'll send you one.
All right. I want to know what motivated you to write this book, and who are some of the most famous people you sat down and broke bread with, or had a glass of wine, or some sort of beverage with.
All right. It's the story goes, Mark McGuire and I were teammates for a long time. In the early 2000s, there was a TV show called The Practice. It was a lawyer show. Mark and I used to watch that show diligently. I mean, every Sunday night, 10 o'clock, or wherever we were, we'd watch the show. And halfway through the show, I'd get this call from this big redhead going, hey, who do you think did it? Who's guilty? And I said, I think she did. Oh, I think he did. So we have these conversations. I said, I wish this could have been taped, And so we used to watch the show diligently. So one evening, I'm watching the show. I get a call from Mike Saunders. Mike Saunders was a trainer for the New York Knicks for 30 years. He says, Barry, I need to talk to you. I said, Mike, I can't talk to you. I'm watching my favorite show. He goes, what are you watching? I said, I'm watching The Practice. Oh, he says, when you go out to L.A., you got to call Michael Badalucco, who's the actor in the show, played a little lawyer called Jimmy Berluti. I said, Mike, I'm Edith and Harold's son from Silver Spring. I'm a trainer. I can't. He's a TV star. I can't call him. He goes, all right. So anyways, about 2-3 weeks later, we're out in L.A. and I get a call from Mike Badalucco. It says, this is Mike Badalucco. I went, oh my God. I said, I get the phone. I said, he's calling me. This is unbelievable. So he calls me and he says, yeah, Mike told me to give you a call. And said, I'd love to come to a game. So he came to a game. We got to meet each other, and we started going out to lunch or dinner when I go to L.A. And he would bring Jonathan Shapiro, who was a writer of The Practice, and then he went on to Boston Legal, and he wrote for a show called Goliath with Billy Bob Thornton now on Amazon. So anyway, so he was a very celebrated writer, and he said we tell stories. Myself and Tony and Walt Jockety, and we'd all get together and have lunch or dinner, and Jonathan would be there and said, Barry, you got to write these down. I said, Jonathan, I'm a trainer. I'm not a writer. He said, no, you got to write them down. So each year he'd say, have you written these stories down yet? I said, no. He said, here's a lady's number. He said, I want you to call her, and she will transcribe the stories. You don't have to write. So that was the genesis of the book. That's how it started with Jonathan Shapiro and Michael Badalucco. And so we'd have dinner. Oh, then we had dinner with Mike, with Mark, and that was a thrill for us, and then he took me on set one day, and it was pretty, so that's how the friendship, we still have friendship. We talk, almost weekly, Mike Badalucco and I still. So that's how the book started. Now I hold a distinction in writing this book, is now I have now written more books than I've read.
Yeah, I don't believe that.
No, I think, and Mike knows, being in professional sports and being on teams that, I was at the Yankees, Oakland, and St. Louis. And we had a good popularity. We had people that followed us. And so, having dinner with Billy Bob Thornton was great. He was just a wonderful, wonderful person, and big Cardinal fan. Not just how'd you guys do yesterday. It was like, hey, there's a guy in the minor leagues. You think he's going to make it up? I'm going, geez, I've never heard of the guy. But, but they study, and they know the facts. One of the great dinners we had was with Neil Armstrong, the astronaut. And he was a wonderful, wonderful guy. Wouldn't sign autographs because he didn't want his autographs sold, for moneymaker. He didn't feel that was right. He would take pictures, tell stories. He was wonderful. And I asked him at the end of the dinner, I said, Mr. Armstrong, I said, did anyone ask a question that wasn't asked? And I'm kind of proud. I'm thinking maybe one of my questions. He goes, no, Barry. Says, I've heard all these questions thousands of times. He goes, the reason there wasn't a new question at the table because there wasn't an 11-year-old here. This is, I get every new question from a 10 or 11-year-old kid.
Yeah.
So it's funny. So that was great. You know what? I've had the opportunity to have dinner with Sandy Koufax, which is great, and Joe Namath, and people that you never imagine. I tell a real quick story. When I speak to groups, I say, I was a little kid in Silver Spring, Maryland, and I grew up cutting lawns for $1 and shoveling snow for $1 and babysitting for 50 cents an hour. And I delivered the Washington Post to 70 houses for $0.015 a paper. I made $1.05 a day. Okay. And then I got the best job in Montgomery County, Maryland. I worked for the Montgomery County Recreation Department, and I made $1.51 an hour. I thought, God, this is unbelievable, And then and in the last year, I've had dinner with Sandy Koufax, Joe Namath, Charles Barkley, and Michael Jordan. You have no idea how your journey is going to end or who you're going to meet in your journey. I met a little kid in Bethany Beach. He says to me, he says, "Excuse me, sir." He says, "Are those Super Bowl rings?" I have my World Series rings on. I said, "No, they're World Series." I said, "Are you a baseball fan?" He says, "Well, I'm a Cincinnati fan." I said, "Have you ever heard of Johnny Bench?" "Oh, yeah, he was greatest catcher." I said, "Yeah." I said, "I had dinner with him 2 weeks ago." He goes, "You're kidding." I said, "Yeah, he lives near me." And I said, "What's your favorite football team?" He says, "Well, my football team is the Indianapolis Colts." I said, "Well, in 2 weeks, I'm the trainer at the Manning passing camp, and I'll see Peyton." He goes, "Oh my God." He goes, "How did you meet these people?" I said, "Let me ask something." I said, "How old are you?" 12. I said, "When you're 60 and 50 years from now," I said, "you have no idea who your 3 best friends, Johnny, Billy, and Joey. All right, you have no idea that Joey's not going to be the next Joe Namath. Billy's not going to be the president of the United States, and Johnny's not going to be, the next Johnny Bench." Tony LaRusso always said, when your best player is your best guy, you have a chance to be a great team. And we had great guys on great teams, And when I speak to groups, I said, not all you kids. I spoke to youth groups, and I talked to. In fact, I had to speak to Indiana basketball this year. I was at Indiana. I went to IU, and so Coach Woodson asked me to talk to him. And I told him one story. I said, Coach LaRusso said, when your best guy is your best player, you have a chance to be a great team. Not every one of you can be the best player, but every one of you can be the best person. And if you're the best person, it will raise you to levels higher than the best player.
More of the Bmore Baseball podcast coming right up. At Pappas Restaurants, we've been serving up Maryland's best crab cakes for over 5 decades, and now we make it easier than ever to get your favorites. With 4 restaurants and sports bar locations across Harford County, Baltimore County, and Anne Arundel County, you can stop in for fresh seafood, ice-cold drinks, and wall-to-wall TVs. But if you can't make it in, don't worry. We'll bring Pappas to you. Our new state-of-the-art shipping and commissary location on Bel Air Road in Nottingham means you can pick up fresh-made meals or have our famous crab cakes and seafood shipped anywhere in the country. Dine in, pick up, or ship nationwide. However you Pappas, we've got you covered. Order now at pappascrabcakes.com. Shop Maryland's largest adult use and medical cannabis menu, located at 1114 Cathedral Street in Baltimore, with medical delivery available throughout Maryland 7 days a week. Only at Relief Shop.
Hello, my name is Reese Friedman, and I'm the daughter of Stephen L. Friedman and Rachel Friedman, and the granddaughter of Michael A. Friedman. Now, the law office of Michael Friedman's firm has been going on for over 35 years. If you or a loved one have been injured or in a serious accident, please call the number right here or email us. Also, we don't want you to hesitate. We're just one phone call away.
Jerry Coleman here. I've been a client of the law offices of Michael A. Friedman for well over 25 years now. From motor vehicle accidents to other tort-related issues, 410-363-6848, or find them on their website at maflaw.com.
I'm retired now, but I was an Orioles home run. Grand slam, actually. Took a sweet ride right into the flag court, and it was awesome. Could be awesome for you, too. If you play Home Run Riches from the Maryland Lottery, you could win instantly, or be a contestant of the game and win $500 for being selected, $500 for every Orioles home run, and $5,000 for every Grand Slam. Sounds like a ball, if you ask me. Enter all season at mdlottery.com.
Your book is phenomenal. I have a signed copy, obviously, from you. I'm in transition, so the book is in a box somewhere. I wish I could hold it up. But you've met so many amazing people, some of the most amazing people in the world. And really the only people I can kind of relate to are the people that I was with coming up with the Oakland A's, and guys that we were surrounded by.
Yeah.
Now, Mac Newton,
Yeah.
Harvey Dorfman, Tony La Russa,
Yeah.
Dave Duncan, and then to list the players. To a man, each had their own incredible story and journey, but they all had incredible, whether it be statements or philosophies or speeches. And I remember time and time again, like after a Tony La Russa speech or after a Mac Newton speech, you and I would make contact and kind of just nod like, wow, that was special. And to talk about that. I mean, how influential were these people? And my gosh, you came up with the Yankees. You went with the Cardinals. So you're surrounded by some of the greatest.
Well, it's funny. When I tell young kids, I said, one of the suggestions I make is that at the end of your day, and we used to say, write things down. Well, now they don't have to write it down. You can record or whatever, I said, write down something someone said to you that was important, a new drill that you learned in baseball, a new form, whether it's hitting or someone said an important quote to you, something you can relate, and write this down, make a journal, and at the end of the year, at the end of a couple of years, you're going to be amazed at some of the things that you can retain. And that's some of the things I'm sorry that I didn't do that years ago, because the book, I went to my friends that we went to dinner with, and they said, oh, remember this? Oh yeah, I remember that. Or you remember this, oh yeah. I mean, when I was at the Yankees, Jerry Naron reminded me of a great story. He said, you remember when we were at the Yankees, we had a rain out on a Sunday, and Steinbrenner sent us down to Patsy's, a New York restaurant, to have a steak dinner. So we all went down there, and Billy Martin was a manager. We walked on to Patsy's, and we all have a steak dinner because at the time we didn't have charter jets that, and so we had to wait for our jet like till 9:00 that night, wasn't going to be there. So we went down to Patsy's, all had a steak dinner, and Billy, the manager of the restaurant, came over and said, Frank would like to talk to you. So Billy said, so he goes up to this little cordoned off area, and about 30 minutes later, he comes back with a Mickey Morabito, who, was our traveling secretary.
Oh, yeah.
And
I think he still is.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
In Sacramento. That's another story. Yeah. But anyway, so he comes back and he says, Bill Kane, who is our traveling secretary, says, so, we need the check. And the waiter, very politely, with the white napkin over his, says, Mr. Sinatra's got the check.
Yeah.
and Bill Kane goes, no. Mr. Steinberg said, I need to get the check. And the guy repeated, Mr. Sinatra's got the check. He went up to see Frank Sinatra. Frank Sinatra bought dinner.
Come on.
For the entire team.
The boss had to back down.
Yeah. The entire team. So, those kind of experiences and stories. And, even Michael, we've had so many neat moments. The 88 World Series, was an unbelievable moment. It wasn't a positive moment, but Kirk Gibson hits a homer effect. That's one of the most celebrated homers in World Series history. And we were there. You know what I mean? And unfortunately, because it wasn't a positive experience,
It is. I'll tell you what, it's the only game one that I recall in any type of major championship setting. I keep telling everyone, I don't remember many game ones, but that one I do remember back in 88. I do want to go back to what you were saying about Sandy Koufax, because I want to thank you in advance. Mike informed me that you have arranged for him to appear on the podcast next. What's it like, though? I mean, obviously, we hear about how reclusive Sandy is. He's been a hero of mine since my youth. He probably was a hero of yours. Would like to talk about that, and then we have to get into some of your memories of Baltimore restaurants.
Okay. Sandy he's a terrific person. Billy Andrade is a professional golfer, is very good friends with him through the golf and baseball world. And so Billy says one day, this is 10, 12, 15 years ago. He says, hey, we're going to have dinner. He was in Florida with me. He says, we're going up to Vero, have dinner with a buddy of mine. So I'm thinking, all right. I said, who? He goes, I'm not going to tell you. You'll be surprised. And I'm thinking, all right. First of all, he knows Arnold Palmer very well because he was on the Arnold Palmer scholarship at Wake Forest, and said, maybe Arnie's going to be there. This is going to be unbelievable. And then he's a good friend with Joe Pesci. I said, oh, maybe this will be cool. So I walk in the restaurant and my eyes open. Here's Sandy Koufax sitting at the table. I went, wow. But anyway, so we've got to be friendly, but he's a wonderful guy. And it's not that he's reclusive. He just doesn't go out a lot. I mean, it sounds like, but you see him out. We've seen him dinner. And he shows up at a golf tournament that Billy plays in sometimes. And I've walked 18 holes with him and no one recognizes him. Because, first of all, the youth and the younger generations now have no idea. Sometimes have no idea who Sandy Koufax is. And that's the sad part. Bordy will tell you if he goes to spring training now, someone may not even know who Mike Bordick is. I doubt it. But,
most won't.
That's the sad part. The kids, because we studied when we were kids. We studied the game. I was a big Washington Senator fan. So Frank Howard was my favorite player because he also moved across the street from me. He was my next door neighbor, and he used to take me to the ballpark with him and sit on the bench, watch batting practice. And one afternoon, Ted Williams comes and sits down next to me, to watch batting practice. And I'm thinking, here's the greatest hitter in baseball sitting next to me. Of course, I didn't talk to him. I was scared to death, 16 years old. And they were playing the Milwaukee Brewers. I mean to get off the subject real quick, but he's playing the Brewers, and the Brewers had Dave Bristol as the manager. He's the youngest manager in baseball. He's 38 years old. Casey Cox was a pitcher for the Senators, comes by, looks at Ted Williams and says, hey, Skipper. He says, their manager's throwing batting practice. How come you don't throw batting practice? Ted Williams looks at him and says, when I was 38 years old, I hit 388. End of conversation. Yeah, no, but so yes, it's amazing. And I did a thing at the Springfield College where I went to school on networking. One of the questions was on networking, and they said, how did you get your networking? And one of the doctors on the panel said, well, I went to school with a guy and I thought he'd be terrific for my practice, so I gave him a call. He says, Barry, your phone book's pretty good. He says, how did you get networking? I said, well, networking is very simple. All networking is being nice to people. Because if we weren't nice, if Bordy and I weren't nice, our network would have stopped. If you're not nice to someone, it's not hard to be nice to people. I think it's harder to make the effort not to be nice, than to be nice. And so, I think if you the fruits of your labor of being nice over the course of years, when you get to be my age, you get to meet a lot. Someone said, how'd you meet all these people? Well, I got old. I got to, you get to meet a lot of people when you get old, and through the years. And so, and you develop relationships, and, and that's, like Bordy and I, since 85, when's your first year? 86.
Came over.
That's, that's 40 years now. It's hard to believe.
Not much has changed, really.
I'm only 49 years old now. So no, but right, our appearances change. But the relationships you make don't. And that's I went to unfortunately Ricky Henderson's funeral out in Oakland. It was spectacular. It was a celebration of life, and for 2 hours I've never smiled for 2 straight hours at a celebration. They had unbelievable people there. Barry Bonds showed up, and Dusty Baker, and Jose Canseco, and Carney, and it was unbelievable. The people that showed up, and they all had great stories, and they, just fun stories about their relationships. And Gary Payton, the basketball player, showed up, and then the final guy was the rapper,
MC Hammer.
MC Hammer. He shows up.
Yeah.
He sings a song.
Baby.
It was great. He was the bat boy for Oakland when years ago. And so those, and you say, God, you remember? Oh, I remember. You used to take care of Ricky. I'm thinking, how do you remember? It's like people along your path, and that's when I'll repeat when you tell these young kids, hey, meet as many people as you can. And that you're never going to know where your journey is going to lead you. I had no idea I was going to spend 33 years in the major leagues. I got turned down from a college job, my first application, and I was devastated. I said, I'll never get a job. I'll never work. I'll never get a job. And, couple months later, I was a trainer with the Pittsburgh Pirates. So sometimes, like they always say, the greatest trades are never made. Sometimes, you never know where your journey is going to lead you.
Right.
Barry, I did want to go back to the book
Please.
for a second.
Okay.
And the question regarding the meals you had in Baltimore over the years. Do any stand out? Any place?
Oh, yeah. The Mimos and
Sabatinos?
Sabatinos, yeah.
Yeah.
Those were always great, And also, at the time, the Inner Harbor was just being developed back in the 80s. I'll never forget that we started at the old stadium, and so we used to eat at the Cross Keys,
Yep.
and then used to eat at Mount Washington Tavern.
Still around.
And I still do that. When I go back and see Adam, we still go to the Mount Washington Tavern.
Nice.
So those things stay with. Now, you look around and you say, wow, the area's changed, and the restaurants changed, and but they still have, those standbys. Those are still there.
We got to make sure we get you some crab cakes from Pappas Seafood. They are
okay. I'd be glad to.
Really good.
And
funny. When we were out in Oakland, I don't know what year it was, maybe 93 or 94, Barry introduced me and our whole team to crabs, man. He had a bunch shipped over.
Team crab?
We had a crab feast out there in Oakland. Yeah, it was a good time, man. Really good.
What do you recall about that? Because there probably were a bunch of guys looking at those crustaceans thinking, I'm not touching these.
Right.
I just looked at it as another beer drinking sport. So it was a great time.
It's an event. You have to take your time. You have to be patient. And it's not just the meat's not gonna jump out at you. You have to work at it. Yeah. But then, like you said, between every sip of beer, there's a good piece of crab meat.
Yeah, absolutely.
Barry, you mentioned earlier about the Manning Passing Academy.
Yeah.
How did that come to fruition? You tying in with Peyton and the family and working in the football element.
Well, the trainer that was Archie's trainer, his name is Dean Kleinschmidt. Dean was a trainer for the Saints for over 30 years. So we've been friends for years. And so when I got out of the major leagues, he says, Barry, Archie want to know if you'd come speak to the team on arm care, the camp. There's 1,200 campers on arm care, being from the baseball perspective. I said, I'd be glad to. So the first 2 years I spoke, and then he said they cut out the speeches at the end because the days got so long for these kids. But now this year, I just got the note. There's 1,500 kids coming. There's 120 counselors or instructors, and about 45, 48 of them are made up of college quarterbacks. All right, they have the quarterbacks from Penn State, Alabama, LSU, Mizzou, Texas A&M, Florida. The years they've had, Lamar Jackson has been there. Wonderful. I hate to say this is a dirty word in Baltimore, but Jalen Hurts was one of my favorites. He's a wonderful young man. Just very polite and very, very. But Lamar was great. Josh Allen was terrific. Dak Prescott was great. Marcus Mariota, Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston was really neat because he's a baseball player. He was actually a good relief pitcher for Florida State. But anyways, all these kids, they come, they got like 8, 9 Heisman Trophy wins. And Archie even told us last year, 30 of the 32 starting quarterbacks in the NFL were either campers or counselors at the camp.
Wow.
So I finally asked about
right
4 or 5 years into it, I said, Dino, how does he get all these starting quarterbacks? He goes, well, how'd you get here? I said, well, Archie called me and wanted to know if I do. He says, what do you think these kids do? And Archie or Peyton calls them. I said, yeah, they're right. In fact, the really funny story, the quarterback, we stay at Nicholls State University in Thibodaux, Louisiana, which is the Bayou.
Jeff Rebele. Jeff Rebele went to Nicholls State.
Yeah. Did he? Yeah.
Before LSU, he did. Yeah.
Yep. So I think Bobby Dickerson.
Yes, Dickerson went there too.
Yeah. So anyway, we stay in the dorms. It's just great. Peyton, Eli, Cooper's the funniest. Peyton and Eli, just wonderful people. They're engaging. They're polite. They're they're as nice as can be. And Archie might be the best. Archie, man, he is one of the nicest men you'll ever run across. very considerate and just wonderful. But anyway, so they roomed the quarterbacks together last year. Now this is in June. They roomed the quarterback from Notre Dame and the quarterback from Ohio State together.
Oh.
Now 7 months later, they play against each other in the college championship.
Oh my gosh.
Is that funny? I mean, what a
That's
coincidence.
sick.
But so these college kids, I'm sitting there looking at two kids. I was saying, kid from Georgia and a kid from Alabama are sitting next to me, and I see them, they're smiling, they're cutting up, and going, in about 4 months, you guys are going to hate each other. But
Right.
but it's the camaraderie. It's a wonderful experience. And Eli and Peyton spend 2 sessions with all the quarterbacks alone. So that it's really a real gift for these college kids to get to spend some quality time with them. And they're there every day. They go to these the sessions with the kids, and it's just wonderful. It's a great experience. I love it. So
Well, the last thing I wanted to ask you
Yeah.
on my end is, so that's on your plate right now, and also you're still the head trainer, as far as I know, for Team Israel, gearing up for another run at the World Baseball Classic.
Right, next year we're going to be in Miami, and someone said, "Geez, why'd you get that?" Well, it was, first of all, it's like, be careful what you ask for, because we'd like to be in the United States, but we're with Venezuela, Dominican Republic, Netherlands, which is really good, and I think Mexico, one other team, Spain. But anyways, which is all really good teams. So the quality is really. In fact, the great part, Albert Pujols is going to manage the Dominican team, so I get to we'll get to play against them. But
Nice.
we're going to be competitive. People are going to be surprised, because we got the way you get to be on the Israeli team for the World Baseball Classic, which differs from the Olympics, is that 1/4 of your lineage, in other words, one of your grandparents has to be Jewish, or if you're married to a Jewish person. And in fact, I ran into Cal, at the Orioles game a week ago. I said, "Cal, I think he married a Jewish lady, And so I said, you qualify for playing for our team now." He smiled. He said, "Barry, I don't think you want this body to play for you anymore." No, he was wonderful. I know he's been a great friend to you, Mike. He's just wonderful. But anyways, so that's the way you get to be on the Olympic. Or I said in the WBC, if you're a very good player and you live next door to a Jew when you're growing up, we'll take you. No, but the Olympic team, you have to be an Israeli citizen.
Yes.
So every American had to go over to Israel and get their birthright to become an Israeli citizen. And that's one of the things we do. I'm on the board with Adam on Israel Baseball America. And one of the things we do is send kids over so they can compete with our international team, compete on our international teams, so they get their birthright. So they, become Israeli citizens. So that's the differential, with the WBC and Israeli. But it's great. It's we went to in 2017. We went over we were the 16th ranked. We won our qualifier in Brooklyn, and we're the 16th ranked team out of 16 teams. Okay, we were a cross between the Bad News Bears and the Jamaican bobsled team going to the Olympics. And so we go over, and we go to Korea. First team we play is Korea, in Korea. Okay. Now, if you ever been to Asia and some of these, to Korea or Japan, they sing, they chant, they play instruments during every at bat, every pitch. They're chanting. It's unbelievable. The spirit is it's fascinating. It's wonderful. So, and we beat Korea, which is unbelievable upset. We upset. Next, we beat Chinese Taipei, and then the last game we played, we beat the Netherlands. Okay, so then we advanced to Japan. The first game we were matched up against Cuba. Okay, we beat Cuba. I told people, and I still get choked up a little, that I've been to 7 World Series. I've been very lucky. Okay, beating Cuba next to that was one of the neatest experiences in baseball. we're a bunch of Jews who've been in existence 5 years. This is Cuban baseball. You know, we beat Cuba. You know, we end up losing to Japan and losing to Netherlands, so we didn't advance, you know, to the final. But you know, it was a great experience. We came back with just wonderful memories, and you know, and so it's grown a little since. And Adam and Nate Fish, who've now taken the bull by the horns and really promoted Israel baseball, and we're really doing a good job in fundraising and what we do. We do camps, clinics, showcases across the country, and we're doing one in Bethesda coming up in June, and then we'll send these kids over to Israel to get their birthright so they can play for our 23 and under, 18 and under team, you know, and then hopefully our Olympic teams.
Very
Right.
cool.
Yeah.
I know I've got my Team Israel hat. I've helped out with a couple of those clinics. Great time. Yeah, you and Adam Gladstone.
Yeah, it was great in Maine. Wasn't that fun?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So you guys care about the kids, their well-being, and of course, Israel baseball. I'm going to change my last question. Okay, The Orioles just got signed a new hiring, a coach named John Mabry, who came over, and has had a great career with the Cardinals. And I think you were part of that Cardinals team and maybe hoisted a trophy with him as well. Can you give us a little insight? Because he's already seemed to have a little impact. The Orioles went on a winning streak as soon as Mabry came aboard.
Well, that's great. Mabes is just a good baseball guy. And as much as that, he's a good person. He's really a good guy. He's one of those really good guys that you gravitate toward and you always root for. And but he's a good baseball guy, and he had a great role and he learned the game. So he knows the game and, from the inside, as a baseball player. And so, he was a successful player and knows how to teach, knows how to relay the information that he's gained over the years to the players at their level now. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
And and I'm not criticizing the analytics completely, but sometimes those people can't relate the information that they have. And I think the information is important. Don't get me wrong. It's important, but you need someone to be a conduit to that information to the players,
Sure.
Well, that's great. I mean, he's a welcome addition to the coaching staff.
I'm glad he's there. I look forward next time in town, hopefully to say hello, but he's just a good guy. He was a good teammate.
Well, listen, we appreciate your time, and we look forward to getting Sandy Koufax back on the podcast.
Okay, yeah, I'll get you.
Let Mike know when he's available, and we'll make time.
We'll work on Bregman, and we'll work on no.
Yeah, we can get all the
next time I play golf with Jordan, I'll tell him he needs to do this.
There you go.
Whoever's in the Rolodex.
I tell you what, now that when you're out of the sport now, sometimes, you don't get as many phone calls, but so that's why I really appreciated this phone call.
We're happy you answered the phone. Thank you.
Oh, you kidding? No, it's a pleasure. Anything from Mike. He was one of my all-time, and I've mentioned that, and he doesn't believe it. But when they said, who's one of your favorite? I said, Mike Bordick. Mike Bordick, who's he? I said, no, when I said one of my favorite teammates and favorite players, as tough as player and as good a player. You have several players in baseball that are 5-tool players, okay? And they can do everything. We had one player, I'm not going to mention, who's a 5-tool player, but did something every day to not help your team win the game. Because he could hit, throw, run, hit for power, speed, everything. Mike Bordick, if you took his 5 skills, had one. He could catch the ball. Didn't have now please don't get me wrong. Didn't have a great arm. Wasn't the fastest guy, right? Didn't hit for a lot of power, okay? But Mike Bordick did something every day that did not show up in the scorebook that helped your team win that game. And I'll end it like that.
Something every week in this podcast that makes it a winning podcast. So
there we go.
I'll take him on my team anytime.
Hey, Barry, thanks for the time. We appreciate
you, Barry. Thanks.
Pleasure. Anytime.
Thanks, brother.
Anytime you get stuck for someone.
Once I finish that book, I think we'll be calling you back.
I'll send a book to Bordy, wherever he is.
Hold on, man. I got it.
I'll get you a book.
You got it. Thanks, Barry.
More of the Bmore Baseball podcast coming right up. It's saving season at Lido Pizza. 99-cent refreshing iced teas for spring and summer. Or $6 calzones every Tuesday. There are tons of new deals and rewards for everyone. Exclusively at LidoPizza.com or on the Lido Pizza app. Lido Pizza, a local legend since 1955. Proud partner of the Baltimore Orioles. They say it all comes back to your roots, right? At Grassroots, high-quality cannabis is in their nature. From soil to soul, their passion for cannabis and community inspires everything they do. Try your favorite strains from their cultivar library of top-shelf flower, pre-rolls, and concentrates. Whether you're cheering from the stands or chanting for the O's at home, their crafted flower helps you curate the perfect game day. Ask for Grassroots Cannabis at your favorite dispensary in Maryland. Everyone knows Greenmount Station in Hampstead, but did you know that at Greenmount Station you can bet 7 days a week just like you're at the track? With in-person teller windows and state-of-the-art touchscreen kiosks. And with Greenmount Station's brand new Bet Park Sportsbook, you can bet on all other sports as well, wherever you are in Maryland. Spreads, money lines, live bets, props, parlays, and teasers. The Bet Parks Maryland mobile app is now live for Apple and Android devices, so you'll never miss your next big score. Just search for Bet Parks MD in the Apple App Store or on Google Play. 21 and over only. Please play responsibly. For help, call 1-800-GAMBLER.
Effective Solutions, your one-stop shop for commercial contracting. Everything from excavation and site development to emergency remediation and restoration. Effective Solutions specializes in many forms of commercial and mixed-use construction. With a dedicated staff and a commitment to quality, Effective Solutions delivers every time.
Take a swing at a healthier mouth and a better-looking smile with my dental team at Catonsville Dental Care. Catonsville Dental Care is a winning team of caring dental professionals who treat you like family. You will love their clean, friendly office where your comfort and care are their top priorities. Catonsville Dental Care has more than 2,000 five-star Google reviews and received many awards, such as Top Dentist and Top Workplace. Catonsville Dental Care accepts most insurances and offers convenient hours, before or after work, and some Saturdays too. Mention the Jerry Special for your $149 new patient visit, or receive $500 off your Invisalign treatment. So get off the bench. Call Catonsville Dental Care today.
All right, that was awesome. Time to move on to For the Birds, Sporty. It's sponsored by our friends over at the Maryland Lottery. Playing the Maryland Lottery responsibly means knowing what's true and what's not about your favorite games. Learn the facts and the myths at mdlottery.com. And please, as always, play responsibly. So the Orioles are coming off a rather successful road trip. They're back home this week, playing some of their best baseball of the year, which the bar isn't too high on that, but what to you has been the biggest difference? I mean, we talked about the starting pitching. Has it been the opponents they're facing? I mean, they beat up on the White Sox, the Mariners. They took care of them in Seattle. That was impressive. Seems like Seattle may be in decline right now. And then they come and lose 2 of 3 to the Athletics out there in Seattle. But what about the addition of Colton Cowser as well?
Yeah, I think there are a couple things that happened, and this roster is getting better with the addition of some of the players that have been on the IL. And Cowser, I think, was sorely missed on 2 ends, the offensive end for sure, but more importantly, in my opinion, the defensive end. Orioles defense continues to be really bad, inconsistent, and Cowser's definitely going to solidify that a little bit in the outfield. The knock now, and it has been for almost a full year. The Orioles offense, where is the consistency? Getting Cowser back certainly going to help. Getting Westberg back is going to help. But man, oh man, have they been sputtering. Even in this winning streak, they've got a hard time scoring over 5 runs. One time they scored 7 runs. They got outscored by the Oakland A's, who through the month of May were the worst team in baseball. I think they were 3-17 through the month. They were worse than the Rockies. And they outscored the Orioles. So
you'll never call them the Sacramento A's, will you? You'll never.
No, man, they're Oakland A's. They'll always be the Oakland A's in my heart. So, yeah, the offense needs to find some consistency. Like I said, they might get a boost, getting Westberg back, Arias, maybe Mountcastle will be back someday, O'Neill for sure, Sanchez. So some of their right-handed bats to help them against the atrocious left-handed hitting, left-handed pitching. They just can't hit them. They're one of the worst teams historically in all of baseball. The bright spot, why they went on a winning streak, is their starting pitching. Their starting pitching was outstanding. But you see what happens when the starting pitching reverts back to what they were for the last 2 months. If they have one bump in the road, they cannot recover because they don't have enough offense. Their bullpen, tip my hat to that. They've been pretty good, but they need more offense.
They do have Kobe Mayo. They have called him up. I don't know how often they're going to play this kid. To me, it should be every day right now. If you're a last place team, I mean, what would you do if you were managing Kobe Mayo at this juncture?
Well, this is the opportunity that the Orioles have right in front of them. Bring all your young guys up and let them play. Who cares now about these older guys that you're going to end up trading anyway? Don't let, move them if you have to. Try to stay competitive, but you need to get a good look at Mayo. You need to continue to play Erstad, even though I believe he should be in AAA, learning how to play defense. But you got to find out what the young guys have to get a better grasp of what you're going to need potentially at the trade deadline, and certainly looking forward to 2026. Foresight is going to be crucial for this Orioles organization to have sustainable success. They've got to find a way to kind of build in success, because their minor leagues aren't doing great either. They need depth and they need good players.
All right, let's move beyond Baltimore, brought to us by Relief Shop, which is Baltimore's best adult use and medical cannabis dispensary, with 700 plus unique menu items and home delivery available always from Relief Shop for medical patients. So the Orioles really got hammered for not re-signing Corbin Burnes during the offseason. I think it was a foregone conclusion. He wanted to go back to Arizona, but now he's done for the year with Tommy John, probably going to miss next year. Does this validate their decision in any fashion not to bring him back? Or is it pure luck?
Oh, I told you so, right? I told you so. Yeah, no, not at all. Not at all. Nowadays, you got to take this kind of chance because pitchers are just dropping like flies. It might be the biggest high-risk investment in all of sports in the world, actually, taking a chance on a starting pitcher. And the ability, because it's such a challenging market, you have to overpay. You got to give them an extra year, whatever it takes to land a starting pitcher. But you better understand this right now. If you sign a multi-year deal for a starting pitcher, chances are they're going to get hurt. So you better add in 2 extra years, a year of being injured, a year of recovery, because that's what it's going to take. So there has to be that understanding, unless they're willing to change the philosophy and stop the max effort pitching and see if they can get guys to last a little bit longer and take care of their prized possession, really their product, the player. You got to keep them healthy and on the field.
Love the passion there. And I think you may be passionate about this next topic because I've been waiting for the ball to drop here, and it sort of did the other night on Sunday Night Baseball. We had a Major League Baseball player being interviewed on live television while trying to play the field simultaneously, and this occurred.
I think we're looking at... 1 second. Damn it!
How embarrassing for Jazz Chisholm. ESPN's got egg on their face as well. I have argued about this with Adam for 2 years, going back to the former podcast. I know you're not probably a big fan of this. Maybe this will put an end to this nonsense, except outside the All-Star game where maybe it's useful. I don't know anyone who tunes into a baseball game to hear what an infielder has to say.
Yeah, no, I am not a big fan of it. And what a distraction. And if you would have seen earlier in that game, earlier in that interview, this was the knock on him. Now, he came out and said in social media that he's only going to start playing 70% because when he plays 100%, he tries too hard. All right, well, listen, man, this is what happens when you play 70%. You lose your concentration, you make a mistake. You know, these mistakes are costly in the big leagues, and we see it time and time again. I totally don't agree with the in-game. Mike, I mean, don't you want your pros, don't you want your best players in the world to have total concentration and focus on the game? And it even bothers me when they interview managers during a game. So it's a head scratcher to me. I know it's all about the dollar, and they think that's a good thing. But, man, Major League Baseball should step in. I just think it makes the product look less like they don't
agree.
care.
There's no clamoring for it. No one says I need this.
Right. No, exactly. How about after the game, players sit around and do interviews instead of, running to the training room so that we can hear what you were thinking in the 7th inning when you threw that ball away, instead of actually hearing you swear on camera and say, oh my gosh, I wasn't quite prepared for that play.
Wow, that's a novel concept. Interviewing players after the game's over. All right. I'll consider that. Maybe Major League Baseball and that 4-letter network should as well. All right. Hey, what's up, Doc? Let's move along. It's What's Up, Doc. It's sponsored by the law offices of Michael A. Friedman, Baltimore's top attorney, my personal attorneys for over 25 years. There's always a live person available when you call the law offices of Michael A. Friedman at 410-363-6848. All right, Doc, first baseman Ryan Mountcastle is the latest Oriole to hit the injured list. He has a grade 2 hamstring injury strain. The injury came while he was attempting to steal home. First of all, should he have been attempting to steal home? That's just an opinion question. But second of all, what about these rash of injuries with the hamstring? It's something we talked about earlier in the podcast with Barry Weinberg.
Well, I think stealing home won that game, so I guess you could argue it was a good play. The other thing you have to check, and Mike knows this very well, sometimes these hamstrings come because the infield dirt is soft or not ideal. And I've seen many, including one I incurred myself, when I just pushed off and there was no resistance, and there went my hamstring. So I think occasionally it's a fault of the weather and or the grounds crew. Beyond that, it's the Orioles, again, with their transparency, have announced it's a grade 2 injury, which on the grade of 0, 1, 2, 3 means if it gets worse, it could be a complete rupture, which is not the end of the world, because you can play like that, particularly as a non-speed guy. If you ever look at old pictures of Joe Namath, you can actually see one of his hamstrings curled up in the back of his thigh while he's playing in the NFL. So you could play that way. But it's going to be a long process to get a grade 2 healed. I think the Orioles are always thinking 3 steps ahead here. I think they want to get him ready for the trading deadline because he would be one of the featured players they would get. So I think they're going to be overly careful with him. And it also gives them a chance, I assume, to put Mayo at first base because he's a hitter looking for a position. So that gives him an option there. To me, that's questionable only because if you've ever seen Mayo play, he's got like a 7 arm, maybe even an 8 arm. He's got a crazy huge arm. So I would have thought they try to make him a right fielder because obviously he struggled with his hands. But I think it gives Mayo a chance to play. It allows them to be very careful. And these things happen. And I just think, again, we've all played sports, but Mike's played it professionally. Stealing home, that's a do-or-die play. I assume he did that on his own, but I don't know that. So it was just a max effort play. Maybe the dirt gave out a little bit under him, and poof, there goes his hamstring. So I think that's an explosive play that just didn't turn out well, as opposed to a training problem or anything else. But you do have to examine the infields because they can be treacherous in certain settings.
There are definitely environmental factors that come into this, and 162 games is in and of itself an environmental factor when a player's healthy, right? So in my opinion, baseball, the evolution of baseball, and I know you were listening to the Barry Weinberg and we're talking about how it's evolved and how to keep players healthy. It's really a head scratcher to me to think that we've come this far and the Orioles have 4 players on the shelf with a hamstring. Now, I feel like back in the day, and Barry talked about this, there would be a collaborative effort to try to understand what just happened. First of all, do you think that happened? And I can't believe it happened nowadays. What are your thoughts?
Well, it's a scientific project. You have to look at the root cause or root cause analysis, as they say. If, for example, they all happened in one stadium, if, for example, they happened on infield dirt, then you could look at structural issues. If they all happened on a certain artificial turf, you could look at something else. Then, of course, you get back to biology. You know, some of our players are speed players, have a history of hamstring injuries. You don't need to go very far. With the player we signed last year, he spent tons of times on the disabled list, so it's not surprising he's there. Like when we would review players, and just like I did not review that player, but I can assure you what the doctor said is he has a history of having all kinds of soft tissue injuries, not just hamstrings. You got to figure he's going to be there 2 or 3 times this year. Is it worth having him? And then you have to know Mountcastle does not have that history, so I would look to him as a different case. But I do think that a lot of this is the player. It may be environmental. I actually doubt that it's the weight training things they do unless they've really gotten into something different on the weight side of heavy weights, explosive stuff. That's more of what we used to call Olympic training as opposed to baseball specific training. But you do have to look at all the factors, and you gotta they took a flyer on the gentleman who's had a blocking on the gentleman from Boston we got, but he has a history of living on the DL, and O'Neill. Obviously his father's a weightlifter. He's obviously apparently looks like a Greek god, and that was pretty predictable. I think it's a sign of the times. What can you say?
Dr. Michael Jacobs is always brought to us by the law offices of Michael A. Friedman. Catch more with the doc with Chip Franklin coming just ahead on our Overtime channel. And speaking of our sponsors, we want to thank the following for their support and making this podcast go.
They say it all comes back to your roots, right? At Grassroots, high-quality cannabis is in their nature. From soil to soul, their passion for cannabis and community inspires everything they do. Try your favorite strains from their cultivar library of top-shelf flower, pre-rolls, and concentrates. Whether you're cheering from the stands or chanting for the O's at home, their crafted flower helps you curate the perfect game day. Ask for Grassroots Cannabis at your favorite dispensary in Maryland.
Hello, my name is Reese Friedman, and I'm the daughter of Stephen L. Friedman and Rachel Friedman, and the granddaughter of Michael A. Friedman. Now, the law office of Michael Friedman's firm has been going on for over 35 years. If you or a loved one have been injured or in a serious accident, please call the number right here or email us. Also, we don't want you to hesitate. We're just one phone call away.
Jerry Coleman here. I've been a client of the law offices of Michael A. Friedman for well over 25 years now. From motor vehicle accidents to other tort-related issues, 410-363-6848, or find them on their website at maflaw.com.
I'm retired now, but I was an Orioles home run. Grand slam, actually. Took a sweet ride right into the flag court, and it was awesome. Could be awesome for you, too. If you play Home Run Riches from the Maryland Lottery, you could win instantly or be a contestant of the game and win $500 for being selected, $500 for every Orioles home run, and $5,000 for every Grand Slam. Sounds like a ball, if you ask me. Enter all season at mdlottery.com.
At Pappas Restaurants, we've been serving up Maryland's best crab cakes for over 5 decades, and now we make it easier than ever to get your favorites. With 4 restaurants and sports bar locations across Harford County, Baltimore County, and Anne Arundel County, you can stop in for fresh seafood, ice-cold drinks, and wall-to-wall TVs. But if you can't make it in, don't worry. We'll bring Pappas to you. Our new state-of-the-art shipping and commissary location on Bel Air Road in Nottingham means you can pick up fresh-made meals or have our famous crab cakes and seafood shipped anywhere in the country. Dine in, pick up, or ship nationwide. However you Pappas, we've got you covered. Order now at pappascrabcakes.com. It's savings season at Lido Pizza. 99-cent refreshing iced teas for spring and summer, or $6 calzones every Tuesday. There are tons of new deals and rewards for everyone, exclusively at LidoPizza.com or on the Lido Pizza app. Lido Pizza, a local legend since 1955, proud partner of the Baltimore Orioles. Everyone knows Greenmount Station in Hampstead, but did you know that at Greenmount Station you can bet 7 days a week just like you're at the track? With in-person teller windows and state-of-the-art touchscreen kiosks. And with Greenmount Station's brand new Bet Park Sportsbook, you can bet on all other sports as well, wherever you are in Maryland. Spreads, money lines, live bets, props, parlays, and teasers. The Bet Parks Maryland mobile app is now live for Apple and Android devices, so you'll never miss your next big score. Just search for Bet Parks MD in the Apple App Store or on Google Play. 21 and over only. Please play responsibly. For help, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Shop Maryland's largest adult use and medical cannabis menu located at 1114 Cathedral Street in Baltimore, with medical delivery available throughout Maryland 7 days a week, only at Relief Shop. Take a swing at a healthier mouth and a better looking smile with my dental team at Catonsville Dental Care. Catonsville Dental Care is a winning team of caring dental professionals who treat you like family. You will love their clean, friendly office where your comfort and care are their top priorities. Catonsville Dental Care has more than 2,000 5-star Google reviews and received many awards, such as Top Dentist and Top Workplace. Catonsville Dental Care accepts most insurances and offers convenient hours, before or after work, and some Saturdays too. Mention the Jerry Special for your $149 new patient visit, or receive $500 off your Invisalign treatment. So get off the bench. Call Catonsville Dental Care today.
Effective Solutions, your one-stop shop for commercial contracting. Everything from excavation and site development to emergency remediation and restoration. Effective Solutions specializes in many forms of commercial and mixed-use construction. With a dedicated staff and a commitment to quality, Effective Solutions delivers every time.
Also, thanks to senior executive producer Chip Franklin, who loves to play golf and tells us only about his birdies when the bogeys outweigh the birdies almost every round. We never hear about those, coincidentally.
The Dalai Lama.
We'll see you next week at Pappas Seafood. Again, June the 17th, a live remote with Joe Orsulak coming up. Until then, be kind, be real, and make sure to be back next week in person for the Bmore Baseball Podcast.
Do you know who I am? I'm kind of a big deal.